Debut albums are one of the most important parts of an artist's career. They can either make or break them. So today we're going to be checking out what I think are some of the best debut albums of all time in rock and metal. And then I'm going to be playing some riffs from those albums. So that means we're going to be checking out only debut albums. So no EPs, no demos, and no freaking Megadeth! To start off, we have the album that got me into rock and heavier music as a whole. It's Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory, released in the year 2000, same year I was born. I believe this is the best-selling debut album of all time, and it's also an absolute classic. You can hear Linkin Park's strengths right from the beginning, from their level of composition and pop sensibility, to the heaviness and groove they got, to the angst, and it's also just a very fun album all around. And I think it's very telling of the band that they showed this amount of talent right from the get-go. And to represent this album, I've chosen one of my favorite Linkin Park riffs of all time, the intro to Forgotten. Next up, it's 10 by Pearl Jam. I hadn't listened to this album front to back before making this video, and I was having a lot of fun listening to it. You can tell the band had a very strong sense of groove from the beginning, and the subtle rock elements that they added to their style really made them stand out to me from the other big grunge bands. And what better song to represent this album than the chorus riff from Even Flow, of course. You should all know by now that I cannot have one of this list kind of videos without adding some death metal to it. So next up we have Morbid Angel with Altars of Madness. To me, Altars of Madness is one of the most definitive death metal albums ever released. Having a lot of thrash metal elements, this album is just front to back full of bangers. From the very tight blast beats by Pete Sandoval to the kinda unorthodox but very iconic riffing style by Trey Azagott, this album is a masterclass of what old school death metal is. And to prove what I'm saying, here's one of my favorite parts from the song Immortal Rights. Following that, we have one of the definitive rock albums of all time, Guns N' Roses with Appetite for Destruction. I've never really been a huge fan of Guns N' Roses, but during the making of this video, a lot of people mentioned that I should check out this album again. I hadn't listened to it in a while, and now checking it out with fresh ears, I was really impressed with the level of composition that it had, the arrangements with the guitars. Both rhythm guitars are typically never doing the same thing at the same time, and it sounds very good together, and it seems like everything is always complementing each other and really serving the song, and I think that is the most remarkable part of it. That and being so catchy. Every single song from this album front to back is just full of catchy choruses, riffs, grooves, and it's a lot of fun. It's just so much fun. So here's a riff I really like from a Guns N' Roses song that I don't think it gets talked nearly enough about, and that is the song Think About You. Making a big impression in your debut album can really help a musician's career get a proper jumpstart. But you know what you're never gonna want to get your debut on? On getting your data stolen. I've talked about this numerous times, but I had my channel hacked before, and it's one of the most stressful experiences of my entire life. That's why I feel much safer now that I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically sends opt-out requests for me. Believe it or not, your full name, email, home address, as well as your relatives' information, it's all out there in public. And data brokers are constantly looking to steal your information to sell to scammers and anyone else who might want to target you. When I first got my channel hacked, I was seriously panicking and stressing about if I was gonna be able to get my channel back at all. By cleaning my data, Aura not only reduces the amount of spam I get, but it also protects me from hackers who could use this information to access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. And trust me, from personal experience, this is one of the worst things you can go through. It's not fun at all. I didn't used to be one to give a second thought to using stronger passwords and monitoring my accounts for weird activity, but when I first got my channel hacked, I started downloading VPNs, antivirus services, and as many security measures I could think of. And after a while, all of that started running me for quite a bit of money. The best part about Aura is that I don't have to download a bunch of different apps and spend a ton of money just on keeping my data secure. I never thought something like this could ever happen to me, and don't think for a second it couldn't happen to you. Better to be safe than sorry. I value my privacy and I value yours, and so should you. You can go to aura.com/jojo or click on the link in the description of this video to start your 2-week free trial. But now, let's get back to checking some more debut albums. Moving on, we have to add some thrash metal to this list. When I was doing the research for this video, I started listening to every debut album from each member of the Big Four. And honestly, none of them seem to be on the level that I wanted for this list. They all show potential on how good they will become in later albums. But the one thrash metal band that I think really made a stellar impression right from their first album was Testament with their album The Legacy. It's got everything you want from a thrash metal album. Sick riffs, fast moshy parts, really good guitar solos, really good groove, and an overall really good sense of composition. As heavy as they are, the songs in this album are pretty catchy too. And of course, what better riff to represent this album than this part from Over the Wall. Let's bring back some grunge to the list and talk about a band that I've been featuring quite a bit in the last couple videos. It's of course Alice in Chains with their debut album Facelift. With the making of the last couple videos, I've been really getting into Alice in Chains, and I must say that Facelift is definitely one of the best debut albums I've ever listened to. They really showed their strengths right from the get-go, and I think it's very cool how they really capture very distinct sounds on overall album, but feeling very cohesive all throughout. From heavier songs to much groovier rock-oriented songs. I think this album is just a joy to listen to, and it really set them up for what they will become as one of the greatest rock bands of all time. I think another grunge band like Nirvana with Bleach has a case of the Big Four in which they show potential with their first album, but it's not really their best work. But I think with Alice in Chains, it's definitely more like Testament, where you will definitely put their first album up there with their best albums. So here's one of the most iconic riffs, the intro to Men in the Box. We brought grunge back in the list, so let's bring death metal back in the list, and this time some more progressive death metal. Because up next is Focus by Cynic. I think this is not just one of the best death metal albums of all time, but also one of the best progressive death metal albums of all time. And it's also one of the most unique and interesting records from the entire genre. You can still hear bands to this day grabbing elements from this album and getting inspired by the style that Cynic developed. Some notable examples will be The Faceless and Obscura. And I could have picked many riffs from this album because it's just full of very interesting ones, but I instead chosen a fun one, which is one of my favorite parts from Veil of Maya. We had some progressive, more complex stuff on the list, so let's bring it back down with some more simple fun with Static X's debut album, Wisconsin Death Trip. In the last couple of years, I've really come to love Static X, and this album is one of the most fun and just utmost enjoyable things I'd ever heard from rock and metal. And I frequently come back to listen to it. Typically, the composition here is very simple, very repetitive. You typically don't get more than 2 or 3 riffs per song, but you don't really need to. It's very catchy. It's a metal album you can really dance to. That's why they call their style evil disco. Here's one of my favorite Static X riffs of all time from the song I'm With Stupid. end this list, we got one of my favorite albums of all time, an absolute madness of a record. It's Dillinger Escape Plan with Calculating Infinity. This album is just chaos incarnate. It's one of the best things I ever listened to. It's absolute insanity. This is the album that perfected the mathcore style. There's been bands that have done this style before, bands like Botch, which Dillinger themselves said that there wouldn't be any Dillinger without Botch. And then there has been bands that have done crazier things with the style like Psyopus. But really, this is the perfect mathcore album. This is just both insane, crazy, technical, chaotic, and violent, but also very memorable in my opinion. And of course, one of the most memorable parts from this album, an absolute statement of a riff, is the intro to the song 43% Burnt. So those are my picks for the best debut albums of all time. Of course, there are many debut albums that I could have included, so please leave them in the comments down below. If you like the video, please click the like button down below. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe already. And if you are already subscribed, make sure you click the notifications bell down below so you never miss a new video. A big shout out to my patrons, which will be appearing on screen right now. Any help I can get goes a long way for me continue making these videos and being able to improve them. And if you would like to get raw stem tracks from the recordings of this video, you can get them by joining my Patreon. If you would like to watch another video where I talk about many more important albums, you can watch it right here. All my social media links and my Discord link will be in the description down below as always, so please go ahead and check it out, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.